Hi, I'm Elara. I worked 3 demanding jobs, sacrificed my dream of traveling, and poured every extra dollar into what I thought was an investment in family. All of it was to ensure my stepmom's son, Jax, could attend an Ivy League university, debt-free. Then, at his lavish graduation party, surrounded by people who celebrated his success, he raised a toast to his brilliant future, subtly implying my sacrifices were simply my duty. My stepmom, Brenda, just smiled proudly. No one defended me. No one even acknowledged the invisible weight I carried. That night, something inside me irrevocably shifted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It didn't begin with a shouting match, not even a heated debate. It started with a quiet assumption, a softly spoken sentence that, at the time, seemed almost forgettable. Yet, I never forgot it. We were at Brenda and my father, Arthur's, house in Pasadena, a Sunday evening around 6. The late afternoon light, a warm golden hue that always signals the shift from summer to fall, filtered through the living room windows. Brenda was meticulously arranging a platter of artisanal cheeses and expensive crackers, while Arthur, ever the traditionalist, poured sparkling cider into crystal flutes as if it were a sacred ritual. Jax, my stepbrother by 3 years, sat sprawled on the plush sofa, absorbed in his phone, occasionally grunting in response to a text, clearly viewing dinner as an inconvenient interruption to his vibrant social life. I'd driven straight from my 3rd job of the day, waiting tables at a bustling bistro, my hands still smelling faintly of roasted garlic and dish soap. I was bone-tired, perpetually hungry, and already mentally calculating how to stretch. My meager paycheck to cover the ever-increasing cost of textbooks for my community college classes. I'd hoped this dinner would be a brief respite, a simple family meal. It wasn't. I just got the official acceptance from Yale, Jax announced, his voice booming with feigned nonchalance, as if he were merely remarking on the weather. Brenda gasped, her hand flying to her chest in an exaggerated display of surprise, though I knew she'd been expecting this news for weeks, if not months. "Oh, sweetheart, we're so incredibly proud of you," she cooed, her eyes welling up with what looked like genuine tears of joy. I offered an automatic smile, a practiced reflex. She hadn't even spared a glance in my direction. "Well, Ivy League tuition is astronomical," Jax added, his eyes still glued to his screen, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. "But it's totally worth it. The connections, the prestige, invaluable." Brenda nodded slowly, dramatically, as if she were single-handedly shouldering the burden of global economics. Then she turned to me, her smile tight and saccharine. "Now, we don't expect you to pay for it, Elara," she began, her voice laced with a strange mix of pity and expectation. "But you've always been so responsible, so practical." She paused, as if waiting for me to acknowledge this as a grand compliment. No one else uttered a sound. Arthur continued to carve the roast. Jack scrolled through his phone, and the rhythmic clinking of silverware against ceramic plates filled the sudden, heavy silence. It felt as though that one sentence had subtly but fundamentally shifted the ground beneath me. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That's how things worked in their family. They never explicitly asked for anything. They simply hinted, implied, and then waited for me to step forward, to pick up whatever burden they had subtly placed at my feet. And then they would walk away, pretending it was my choice all along. Later that night, after the elaborate dinner, dishes were cleared, and I had driven back to my tiny, 1-bedroom rental apartment. I sat in front of my meticulously organized budget spreadsheet. I'd been diligently saving for a down payment on a small duplex. Nothing grand, just a modest 2-bedroom with a small yard. Something I could call my own. Something stable. A tangible piece of security after years of transient living. $22,500 was the bold, glowing number at the bottom corner of my screen. If I maintained my current savings rate, I'd hit my goal by late spring. But then, Arthur's voice echoed in my mind, a phantom whisper from a conversation long past. Student loan debt breaks people, Elara. I've seen it ruin futures. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before slowly, reluctantly, pulling up my banking app. 2 days later, I transferred $15,000 to Jax's university account. It was for his initial fees, the enrollment deposit, pre-orders for expensive textbooks, the housing deposit for his luxurious on-campus apartment. I didn't tell him where the money came from. I didn't tell anyone. When he eventually texted, "Thanks, sis," followed by a string of smiling emojis, I simply replied, "No problem." That night, I lay in bed, listening to the incessant hum of the city outside my window, trying to convince myself, it's just money. He's family. I can catch up. I've always caught up. But a cold, unsettling unease had settled deep within me. Something felt fundamentally off. The very next morning, during my short break at the community college library, I idly scrolled through Instagram and saw Jax's latest post. A first day of Ivy League life reveal, complete with a brand new designer backpack, a pair of pristine high-end sneakers, and a series of meticulously staged photos inside his spacious, single-occupancy dorm room. In the background of one video, a friend shouted, "King of the campus!" I stared at the screen, the familiar twist in my stomach returning, tight, silent, and sharp. It wasn't just the money. It was the blatant disregard, the casual display of wealth, the unspoken assumption that my hard-earned cash was simply a resource for his indulgent lifestyle. 2 weeks later, I arrived home from a particularly grueling late shift at the bistro and found a large, heavy box sitting on my porch. Brenda's elegant script adorned the top. "Jax's mail. Thought you could drop it off for him since you're so responsible." I sighed, dragged the cumbersome box inside, and began sorting through a cascade of glossy university brochures, pre-approved credit card offers clearly aimed at affluent students, and unopened catalogs for high-end fashion and electronics. Then I saw an envelope with my name on it. Elara Hayes, co-signer, was printed boldly under my address. I froze. Co-signer. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I slid it open with a trembling hand and pulled out the legal-looking letter inside. Terms, repayment, schedules, exorbitant interest rates. My breath hitched. I never signed anything, except I must have. Somehow. I sank onto the cold floor, the pages of the loan agreement scattered around me like fallen leaves. I hadn't just helped him. I'd co-signed something. Something massive. Something that could and very likely would financially cripple me. In that shattering moment, the full weight of what I had unwittingly done crashed down on me. I hadn't just helped him. I had signed away everything. I didn't sleep much the night I opened that unsettling envelope. Even after I meticulously rechecked the loan papers, scrolled back through every email, every text thread. There it was, buried in a line I hadn't thought twice about, tucked away in an endless stream of digital confirmations. Acknowledgement of guarantor. All it took was a rushed e-signature at the university housing office portal, where Jax had claimed his housing paperwork needed a backup signer, just in case. Just in case. He hadn't mentioned student loans. He hadn't mentioned that I would be the one unequivocally on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Months passed after that night, and I didn't utter a single word about it to anyone. I simply kept working, doubling my shifts at the bistro, picking up extra hours at the community college bookstore. I skipped meals to stretch gas money, making sure every drop fueled my increasingly exhausting commute. My savings plan for the duplex, once a tangible dream, became a distant, almost painful memory, utterly forgotten. The small house I'd once dreamt of owning, a symbol of my hard-won independence, was now replaced by a relentless payment schedule that would undoubtedly outlive my 30s, possibly even my 40s. Then came the dinner. Brenda left me a chirpy voicemail. "We're having a little get-together this Friday. Jax is home for spring break. You should absolutely come." I almost didn't. I stared at the message on my phone 3 separate times that day, my thumb hovering over the delete button. The third time, I deleted it, but not before hearing Brenda's casual, "He misses you." Did he? I seriously doubted it. Friday rolled around faster than I had hoped. I left work at 6, scrubbed my hands raw in the small, cramped employee restroom, and changed into a clean, if slightly wrinkled, sweatshirt. I kept my work shoes on. There wasn't time to swing by home. As I pulled into Brenda and Arthur's sprawling driveway, I could already hear the upbeat pop music drifting from the open windows. Their house glowed, bathed in the soft, inviting light of dozens of scented candles. The dining table was dressed meticulously, adorned with an elaborate centerpiece and polished silverware, as if they were expecting a visiting dignitary, not a college sophomore on a 2-week break. I stepped inside, my worn work shoes squeaking faintly on the freshly polished hardwood floors. Brenda looked up from arranging a vase of exotic orchids and smiled, a practiced, almost indifferent expression, as if I had shown up uninvited. "Well, you made it," she said, her voice devoid of genuine warmth. "Go freshen up. Dinner's almost ready." Jax emerged from the kitchen, a vision in a perfectly tailored silk shirt and designer jeans, his hair immaculately styled, his smile a flash of teeth rather than genuine warmth. He looked like he belonged. On the cover of a glossy magazine. "Did you come straight from the kitchen pit?" he asked, sniffing the air dramatically, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. I let it go. That was the only way to survive these nights. To simply absorb the petty jabs and deflect the veiled insults. Dinner was an elaborate affair: roasted lamb with rosemary, asparagus drizzled with truffle oil, and creamy mashed potatoes. I found myself relegated to a chair between Arthur and a rarely used grandfather clock, practically invisible. Jax, meanwhile, was seated squarely in the center of the table, his wine glass perpetually full, his arms gesticulating wildly as he regaled everyone with stories of his enlightening lectures, his groundbreaking professors, and an upcoming incubator trip to London. No one asked how I was. No one even made eye contact with me unless I reached for the gravy boat to refill someone's plate. Arthur, halfway through dessert, handed Jax a slim, elegantly wrapped gift box. "We know you've been networking like crazy, sweetie," he said, his voice brimming with paternal pride. "Thought this might help with your interviews." Inside was a sleek silver laptop, the latest model, one I knew I had partially paid for when my checking account had hit overdraft just last week, drained by an unexpected university administrative fee that was mysteriously charged to my account. Jax beamed. "Oh my God, thank you, Dad. This is amazing." He didn't thank me. He never did. I bit into a dry piece of pound cake, forcing myself to chew slowly, trying desperately to tune out the conversation, trying not to care until the topic abruptly shifted. "So," Jax began, twirling his fork nonchalantly, "I got nominated for a summer abroad program. Rome. Incredible opportunity." "Oh, how utterly lovely," Brenda cooed, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Of course it's not cheap," Jax continued, his gaze flicking to me, a smirk barely concealed. "Hope you're ready to pick up a 4th job, sis." He said it like a joke. Light, playful, but every single syllable landed like a direct blow. There was a pause, one of those tight, artificial silences that people awkwardly fill with nervous laughter. I managed a polite smile, even as something cold and sharp twisted deep in my chest. "Maybe," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, "you could pick up a job this time, Jax." Jax raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Me? A part-time job? That's rich coming from someone who's been working at the same community college and bistro since high school. Laughter, brief and uneasy, rippled around the table. Brenda quickly jumped in, shaking her head. Let's not ruin dinner, children. Arthur cleared his throat and passed the butter dish as if we hadn't just witnessed someone deliberately ignite a small fire at the dinner table. I finished my cake in strained silence, then stood up, feigning a sudden need for the bathroom. I walked down the hall, my heart pounding, my ears burning. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. In the pristine bathroom, I ran cold water over my hands and stared at my own reflection in the mirror. I looked utterly exhausted. My eyes, once bright and sharp, had become hollow, rimmed with dark circles over the past few months. I reached for my wallet, needing a mint to settle the churning in my stomach. But when I opened the flap, I saw it, tucked carefully behind my insurance card, a faded photo of Jax and me as kids. It was one of those cheap strip mall snapshots from a decade ago. Both of us grinning, missing front teeth, our cheeks painted with crude, colorful butterflies from a local fair. I stared at it, then quietly, deliberately, I slid it out, folded it carefully in half, and slipped it into the drawer beneath the sink. I didn't tear it. I didn't curse his name. I just let it go. It was a small, seemingly insignificant act. But in that moment, it felt like the first unfettered breath I had taken in weeks. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. The streets were sparsely lit, Pasadena quiet in the way only affluent suburban towns get after 10 at night. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. I kept hearing Jax's voice, that dismissive, mocking tone. That's rich coming from someone who's been working at the same community college and bistro since high school. He'd said it like a punchline, like I was merely a side character in his grand, unfolding narrative. And for the first time, I allowed the thought to fully settle in. Maybe I really was just the perpetual loser in their story. That thought echoed relentlessly in my head as I tossed my work shoes into the corner of my tiny apartment and slid onto my worn couch that night. The springs squeaked in protest. I didn't care. I was too tired to change out of my clothes, yet too wired to sleep. Around 2:13 a.m., the exact time burned into my memory. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a weather alert or some unsolicited junk ad. But the notification wasn't from a news app. It was from my credit monitoring service. New inquiry under your name. View alert. I blinked, sat up straighter, and clicked the link. Just like that, any hope of sleep vanished for good. A new lease had been opened in my name. Student housing, a different building from where Jax had been staying. Confused, my fingers trembling, I scrolled through the digital file. There it was, in bold, unmistakable letters. Cosigner, Elara Hayes, relationship, financial guardian. My hands started to sweat, a cold clamminess spreading across my palms. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even heard about a new lease. I stared at the line, reread it, my throat tightening, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. Clicking the contact number listed on the document, I waited through 3 agonizing rings. A woman picked up, her voice groggy but polite. University Suites, leasing office. This is Hannah. I just got a notice about a lease under my name, I began, trying desperately to keep my voice calm, to project an air of composure I didn't feel. It says I'm the co-signer for Unit 4C. I didn't apply for anything. She asked for verification. I numbly provided it. After a brief pause, she said plainly, her voice devoid of emotion, "You're listed as the responsible party. Your brother Jax said you agreed to co-sign and handle the deposit." I couldn't respond for a full beat. My jaw clenched so hard I felt my molars ache. "I never signed anything," I said finally, the words a strained whisper. She sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. "I mean, It was done electronically. Maybe he did say you were like his financial guardian. I managed a strained thanks and hung up, my hand shaking as I lowered the phone. Then I got up, walked to my laptop, and pulled up the document again. I read it 3 times, every term, every clause, every line of fine print. Then I quietly emailed it to my work inbox with the chilling subject line, evidence. I didn't text Jax. I didn't call Brenda or Arthur. I didn't rage on social media. I didn't slam things or scream. I sat in silence with a cup of lukewarm black, coffee and a dull ache behind my eyes. The kind of ache that sits precisely between simmering anger and crushing realization. I had crossed some unseen line without knowing it, and now, it seemed, I couldn't walk back. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That weekend, I drove south to Los Angeles, a 2-hour journey that usually felt like an escape, but now just amplified the gnawing sense of betrayal. Jax had left a box of things at Brenda and Arthur's house, some expensive art books and an array of designer toiletries he claimed were essential and couldn't live without. I figured since I was off on Sunday, I'd deliver it. Clear one more item from my ever-growing mental to-do list, a list dominated by the invisible debts and responsibilities I now carried. He was waiting in the opulent lobby of his new apartment building, a sleek, modern structure that looked more like a luxury hotel than student housing. He air-kissed my cheek with a practiced flourish, as if he were hosting a charity gala and I was a minor donor. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his designer sneakers pristine, his gold-plated phone case gleaming in the lobby's soft lighting. "You made it," he said, his voice casual, as if I were merely an Uber driver he'd summoned. "The guys are upstairs. They've been dying to meet you." I didn't say much, just offered a tight-lipped smile, and followed him up 2 flights in a silent elevator, the box feeling heavier with every ascending floor. We entered a living room that looked less like a college dorm and more like a meticulously curated Instagram set. 4 young men, all equally well-dressed and seemingly oblivious, sat around sipping colorful, pre-mixed drinks, their eyes glued to a large flat-screen TV. They barely glanced up as we entered. "This is Elara," Jax announced with a dismissive shrug, his voice laced with a subtle disdain. "She helps me out sometimes." One of the guys, a lanky blonde with an expensive watch, raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Oh, like, your assistant or something?" There it was, the casual dismissal, the effortless demotion. I didn't answer. I didn't correct them. I simply placed the cumbersome box near a corner, gave a curt nod, and turned around, walking back towards the door before Jax could utter another word. Jax called after me, a hint of genuine surprise in his voice. "Hey, you don't want to hang a bit?" I didn't even look back. On the drive north, I kept my windows cracked just enough to feel the cool wind slice into the car. It kept me awake, kept the simmering heat of anger from boiling over in my chest. I thought about those guys, how none of them knew me, how they never would, because Jax never wanted them to. He'd erased me, not in a loud, public, cruel way I could easily call out. No, he'd done it gently, casually, like a blurry edit in a photo, subtly cropping out what didn't fit his carefully constructed narrative, his curated image of the self-made Ivy League student. And I, in my misguided loyalty and silent sacrifice, had let him. Back home, I didn't kick off my shoes or consider grabbing dinner. I went straight to my desk, my movements deliberate, almost robotic. I opened a new folder on my laptop, a simple, ominous title, "For Later." I dragged in the lease PDF, the entire email trail, meticulously captured screenshots of every single bank transfer, every Venmo payment I had sent him, every gift receipt for the necessities he'd claimed to need, old text messages where he'd casually said things like, "Can you spot me till next week?" And I'll pay you back after finals? I didn't know exactly what I was building, what intricate web of evidence I was constructing, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I needed it. Because someday, someone would ask me why I stopped, why I finally said, no. And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. It was a Wednesday. I remembered that because Wednesdays were always oil change specials at the independent garage where I worked my primary full-time job. That meant pure chaos, long lines of impatient customers, and people breathing down your neck for a $20 Saab coupon. I had just finished logging out a customer's invoice, my brain buzzing with the day's endless calculations, when I sat down in the cramped break room and mindlessly opened Facebook to scroll during my short lunch break. That's when I saw it. A shared post from Brenda and Arthur's old friend, Eleanor. The caption read, "So proud of this brave young man for staying strong. Let's help Jack stay in school after unexpected hardship." I blinked, my stomach churning, and clicked the link. Then I stared. Jax's GoFundMe page. Keep Jax in school. I read his words slowly, as if my brain couldn't quite register the egregious combination of letters. After our parents lost their retirement fund in a devastating market downturn, I've been scraping by, doing everything I can to stay afloat. My older stepsister tries, but she can't always help. I'm doing this alone. Underneath the text was a carefully staged photo of him on the floor of his lavish dorm room, bundled in a worn-looking sweater, clutching a thick textbook to his chest, like it was all he had left in the world. The room had suspiciously good lighting. Too good. The bed strategically unmade for an appearance of struggle. The angle purposeful, designed to elicit sympathy. And then another shot. Him standing in front of a window, his head turned slightly, a single glistening tear tracking one cheek. I didn't know when he'd learned to cry on cue, but he was disturbingly good at it. My hands began to tremble, a furious tremor that spread through my entire body. $1,500 every month. Groceries, extra books, clothes, Wi-Fi bills. I paid it, quietly, steadily, month after month. While he was online, expertly collecting sympathy money from strangers, from our unsuspecting neighbors, from Eleanor and her knitting circle. He had the audacity to call me someone who tries. I exited the app, walked outside, and sat heavily, on the curb next to the dumpster behind the garage. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. I just opened the browser on my phone and printed the GoFundMe page, then took screenshots of every single comment, every single donation. $20 from Aunt Martha, $50 from my high school soccer coach, $100 from someone I didn't even recognize. I forwarded it all to my personal email. Then I reopened the folder on my laptop that I'd created the night I found out about the lease, for later, and now it had new, infuriating content. Before I left the garage, I dug through my desk drawer and pulled out a dog-eared business card. Liam Garcia, legal aid. He'd come in months ago when his beat-up sedan's alternator blew out. I remembered him because he insisted on paying, in full, even though I offered a discount due to his financial hardship. I typed out an email right there in the quiet office before heading home. Subject, hypothetical question. Body. Liam. If someone were raising money online using misleading information, say claiming severe financial hardship while secretly being substantially supported by someone else, would that be considered fraud legally? Hypothetically, of course. Elara. I didn't expect an answer right away. Legal people worked on their own time, at their own pace. But just sending the question, just taking that single deliberate step, felt like putting my foot down, a concrete action in a world that had felt entirely out of my control. Dinner that night was a bowl of cold pasta that had sat out too long. The sauce had congealed into the noodles. I didn't bother reheating it. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the blank wall across from me, the one where Jax's graduation photo from high school used to hang, a grinning, triumphant image. I'd taken it down last week without even consciously realizing it. My fingers had just lifted it like muscle memory and placed it in a dusty drawer. I thought about the time he'd failed that calculus class his first semester at Yale. He'd called me, sobbing hysterically. I'd driven down that same night, armed with a tub of his favorite ice cream, and spent the entire night on the floor of his luxurious dorm room, just listening. He'd curled into me like a frightened child, whispered he didn't know if he truly belonged there. Was it real? That fear? That vulnerability? Or was it just a dress rehearsal for this elaborate narrative he was spinning now, where he was the struggling self-made prodigy, the underdog, while I was simply the background noise, the silent, unsuspecting ATM? I typed a message to him. "We need to talk." Then stared at it for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the send button. Deleted it. What was there left to say? He'd written his story, and I wasn't in it. Not really. Not as a stepsister. Not as a person. Just a vague idea, a helper, a stepping stone. I turned off the lights and left the dishes in the sink. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed again. An email. Subject, hypothetical question. Body. Elara. Technically, if someone raises funds under false pretenses, especially if it causes real harm to others, or is used for personal benefit instead of the stated reason, it can definitely fall under civil fraud. There's a process to report this. Let me know if you want to talk more. Liam. Attached was a link. Report a GoFundMe violation. I stared at the screen for a long time. Did I click it? No, not yet. I closed the laptop, turned off my lamp, and as I lay there in the profound quiet of my apartment, I whispered to the dark, the words a silent promise to myself. Let him keep digging. It had rained that morning, one of those soft, intermittent Pasadena drizzles that didn't quite soak your coat but made everything feel damp. Your shoes, your shoulders, your spirit. I parked my truck 2 houses down from Brenda and Arthur's driveway, more out of habit than necessity. I hadn't called ahead. I just showed up, the way family used to. Inside a small canvas bag on the passenger seat was the gift I'd spent 2 months painstakingly making. A hand-bound photo album. I'd restored every old family photo I could find. Yellowed edges, ink-smudged dates, water stains from the attic. I'd scanned, color-corrected, printed, and meticulously arranged them chronologically. I'd even slipped in handwritten captions. Like 4th of July, 1998. Dad and the grill he never cleaned. I wanted it to mean something. For once, I wanted to bring something that wasn't a bill paid or a favor done, but a gift that was truly mine, crafted with my own time and effort from the heart. When I stepped inside, the party had already started. Balloons in celebratory gold and white floated near the ceiling. A large chocolate sheet cake dominated the dining room table, and people I barely recognized sipped sweet tea from red Solo cups, their laughter echoing through the house. I caught Arthur's eye across the crowded room and began to walk toward him, the photo album tucked securely under my arm. But before I reached him, Jack swooped in that effortlessly theatrical way he had. He plucked the album from my grip and beamed, his eyes sparkling with a manufactured delight. "Dad, this is from both of us," he announced, his voice ringing with false sincerity. Arthur looked genuinely surprised, then utterly delighted. "You two did this?" he asked, his face softening with emotion. Jax nodded, slipping his arm through Arthur's like he belonged there more than I ever did, more than I ever could. Arthur hugged him tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "You always remember the little things, sweetie." I stood there, my hands, now empty, feeling like I had simply delivered a package instead of having created a cherished memory. A few minutes later, I heard Brenda in the kitchen, her voice carrying over the general hum of conversation. "Jax really brought the family together again this year, didn't he?" I didn't correct them, didn't say, "Actually, I made that." Or, "He didn't even know it existed until today." I just poured myself a glass of flat ginger ale and found a quiet chair by the window, watching the familiar scene unfold around me as if I were an outside observer. Sometime later, I wandered into the kitchen while most guests hovered around the cake. Brenda was organizing serving trays, her pearl earrings bouncing with each motion. I leaned against the counter and said quietly, the words feeling heavy in my throat, "It's getting a little hard, Brenda." She looked up, barely pausing in her task. "What is?" I hesitated, trying to find the right words that wouldn't sound like an accusation. Being here, watching him take credit for everything, feeling like I don't exist. She set down a spoon with a metallic clink, finally looking at me fully, though her expression was one of mild irritation rather than concern. "Elara, come on. You're always so emotional. It's always about how someone wronged you. You make yourself the victim every single time." That word. Victim. I'd heard it before, from Jax's lips, once in a whisper she didn't know I caught. But from Brenda, from the woman who had stepped into my life and promised to be a mother figure, from the woman who used to tuck me in, rubbing circles on my back when I had nightmares, it hit differently. I didn't reply. There was simply no fight left in me. She hummed a little tune under her breath, as if our conversation had been nothing more than tiresome background noise. Later, upstairs, I lay on the twin mattress in my childhood bedroom, staring at a ceiling that had once held glow-in-the-dark stars. Now it was just paint, faded and chipped like the rest of this aging house. Framed pictures lined the dresser. Jax at his high school prom, Jax at his high school graduation. Jax in his cap and gown, all teeth and triumph. My photos were few, and far between. One, from 3rd grade, where my bangs were crooked and I had a scab on my chin from falling off my bike. I sat up and reached into my purse, pulled out the letter, still folded, still creased in that way paper remembers pain. The loan agreement I never signed, but apparently did. I didn't open it. I just held it, a tangible reminder that even in silence, even in generosity, someone could rewrite your story without your permission, erase your contributions, and claim them as their own. I didn't cry. Not anymore. At dawn, I packed my things, slipping out of the house like a guest who had overstayed their welcome. In the hallway, just before I reached the front door, I heard laughter drifting from the kitchen. Jax's voice, clear and cutting. "She's so dramatic. It's always about her feelings." That one sentence hit harder than anything Brenda had said the day before. There was a clink of plates, a fresh round of laughter. No one noticed I was leaving. I didn't. Slammed the door, but I didn't look back either. I had less than a quarter tank of gas left and a dull headache from skipping lunch. The sun had dipped below the edge of the Pasadena skyline, casting that familiar orange haze over the gas station lot as I pulled in, my worn boots sticking faintly to the floor mat from a long shift at the garage. All I wanted was to fill up, go home, and collapse into bed. I slid my debit card into the pump. Declined. I tried again, slower this time, holding my breath as if that would somehow change the outcome. Declined. Maybe the machine was busted. I grabbed my phone, walked inside, and handed my card to the guy behind the counter. He swiped it 3 times, his expression apologetic. "Ma'am, it's saying your account is locked." Locked? I blinked, mumbled a thank you with whatever politeness I could gather, and stepped back outside to sit in my truck, my heart beginning a frantic thrum. My fingers felt disconnected from my brain as I opened my banking app. 0. Not a low balance, but completely frozen. Access denied. I tried the help chat, but it redirected me to the fraud department. Within minutes, I was on the phone with a voice far too calm for the kind of news she was about to deliver. "There was an alert triggered from a linked lease agreement," she said, her voice professional, unfeeling. "Someone connected your account to a student housing contract flagged for irregularities. It's a precaution until we verify your authorization." I could feel my lungs tightening, a sudden suffocating pressure. I didn't authorize anything. I don't even live in student housing. Well, your name is listed as a financial guarantor on the lease. It's now under audit. I sat in stunned silence, the words echoing in my ears. We recommend filing an identity theft report, she added, as if advising me on a minor inconvenience. Identity theft? This wasn't some stranger across the country. This was Jack's. That lease. That blatant lie. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was an attack. I hung up and stared straight ahead, my vision blurring slightly. A couple pulled into the pump next to me, laughing, their conversation light and carefree. Normal people with normal gas, with unfettered access to their own money. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was empty. A profound, aching emptiness. Then came the insidious whisper in my head, Brenda's voice. You're too dramatic. Was this dramatic? Sitting in my truck, unable to buy gas because my stepbrother played poor while systematically draining me dry? No. This was theft. This was war. I drove home on fumes, the truck coughing and sputtering every few blocks, threatening to die at any moment. As soon as I got inside, I went straight to the old battered filing cabinet I kept in my living room, yanked out my For Later folder, and spread everything on the kitchen table. Leases, screenshots, bank statements, the whole infuriating mess. Then I called Liam Garcia, the legal aid guy I'd once fixed a muffler for, the one who owed me a favor. Yeah, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's time to meet. 3 days later, I came home from work and saw a notification pop up on my phone. Jackson Lux posted a new video. I clicked without thinking, my fingers moving independently of my conscious thought. The caption read, "Birthday surprise for the best man I've ever known. So grateful." The video opened with soft, sentimental music, flickering candles, and Jax's boyfriend's voice, thick with emotion, saying, "No way, are you serious?" He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a sapphire pendant. I knew that necklace. I bought it for Jax the night he graduated from high school. I'd worked double shifts for 2 weeks straight, skipped meals, walked to work to save gas money, just so I could afford something truly special for him. Something that symbolized my belief in his future. He'd cried when I gave it to him, told me no one had ever believed in him like I did. Now it was his. "He deserves the world," the caption read, a subtle jab at me. I didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't throw the phone across the room. I simply saved the video, filed it in my ever-growing folder of evidence, and moved on. That night, while pasta boiled, half forgotten on the stove, I sat down at my desk. One by one, I pulled up my HR records at the garage and removed Jax as my emergency contact. Then I opened a blank document. Subject: Financial Independence Notice. I wrote the whole thing out. How I was no longer financially supporting Jax. How any further charges in my name would be met with immediate legal recourse. How I hoped they'd understand this wasn't punishment. It was protection. I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved it in drafts. I leaned back in the chair, my arms crossed, my heart steady for once. Let them call me cold. I'd rather be cold than invisible. Pulled into their driveway just after 10 on a Saturday morning, the heat already clinging to the edges of my sleeves. The folder on the passenger seat felt heavier than it should have been. Paper and ink, yes, but more than that. Every page inside it was a weight I'd carried in silence, a burden I was finally ready to lay down. My hands weren't shaking when I rang the doorbell. That surprised me. Arthur answered, his expression a mix of surprise and mild irritation. "Elara, didn't expect you this early." "I figured we should talk while there's still light," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the apprehension churning within me. He didn't ask what about. In the living room, Brenda sat with her second cup of herbal tea, her pearls gleaming softly. Thankfully, Jax wasn't there. I sat across from them, pulled the thick folder from my tote bag, and laid the pages out on the polished coffee table. Statements, screenshots, even the damning video of the necklace. Brenda gave it a dismissive glance. "You printed out TikToks now, Elara? Really?" "I'm showing you how deep this goes," I countered, my voice low but firm. She crossed her arms, looking more tired than alarmed. "Why bring this here? What is it you want?" "Because I've been funding his life while he makes a mockery of mine," I explained, each word a carefully measured release of long-held frustration. "And you both pretend not to see it." Arthur leaned forward, finally scanning a document, his brow furrowing. "This lease? This says you co-signed?" "I didn't," I stated flatly. "And the credit freeze on my bank account? That's because of that lease, because of his lies." Brenda looked at me as if I was wasting her Saturday morning with a petty squabble. "Elara, that's between you and your brother. Don't drag us into your jealousy." I blinked, genuinely taken aback. "Jealousy? He's building a future. You've always stayed local. You chose that." "I chose it so he could go," I retorted, my voice rising slightly. "I picked up a third job so he could stay. Don't pretend like my sacrifices were nothing." Arthur held up a placating hand. "No one forced you, Elara." "I didn't say anyone did," I shot back, the cold stillness beginning to slide into my chest, the kind that doesn't beg for validation anymore. "But don't pretend like my sacrifices were nothing." Brenda sighed, a long-suffering sound. "Look, Elara, we appreciated your help, but don't compare yourself to Jax. You've always been different." That was it. Not "we're sorry." Not "we didn't know." Just "you're different." I stood, gathered my folder, each page now feeling lighter, and left their house without another word. Outside, the sun was too bright, almost blinding. I walked 2 blocks before I realized I'd left my car. I turned back, but halfway down the street I heard someone call my name. "Elara." I turned. It took a second to place him. Jonah Evans, high school speech team, senior yearbook editor. He used to tell me I was the smartest girl in our class. He looked good. Broad shoulders, a pleasant, dad-like haircut, a wedding ring glinting on his left hand. He smiled warmly. "Didn't think I'd run into you here. Still in town?" "Yeah," I nodded, managing a small smile. "Still around." "You still working at the community college? Jerry's Auto?" he asked, referring to the garage. I hesitated. "Just between jobs," I replied, a half-truth that felt like a full lie. He nodded politely. "Well, I always thought you'd end up running your own shop or something. You used to talk about that. Still dreaming of it?" I smiled thinly. "Something like that." He mentioned his kids, his wife, the new house near Clovis. I wished him well. Wished I meant it. When I got back in my car, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror for a long minute. Still around, still working, still helping. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote, "I wasn't the loser. I just believed the wrong story." I listed everything I had done for Jax. Every transfer, every grocery trip, every rent payment. 3 pages typed, a stark accounting. At the bottom, I wrote, "Final tally, final straw." In the morning, I opened my email and attached the letter I'd drafted days ago to Brenda and Arthur. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. Just a few precise sentences. "This isn't war, but it is closure. I won't be funding or facilitating anything for Jax going forward. I wish you both health and clarity." I didn't sign it with love, just my name. I turned off my phone and drove straight to Liam Garcia's legal aid office. The receptionist recognized me. "You here to see Liam?" "Yes," I said, a newfound resolve in my voice. "And I'm ready to talk options." I thought that was the end. The confrontation, the email, the visit to the legal aid office, I believed I had drawn my line, that the saga of my unspoken sacrifices was finally over. Until he came knocking, crying, begging, and, inevitably, lying. It was almost 9 in the evening, and I'd just gotten out of the shower when I heard the knock. Not frantic, just persistent, the kind that waits you out, knowing you're home. Through the peephole, I saw him. Jax. Mascara streaks like paint on a wet canvas. His arms crossed tight like they were physically holding him together. When I opened the door, I didn't say a word. "You can't just cut me off," he blurted, his voice already cracking, laced with a mix of panic and indignation. "You don't understand what I'm dealing with." I stayed in the doorway, one hand on the knob rooted to the spot. I didn't invite him in. Not anymore. "Please," he continued, his voice dropping to a desperate plea. "They're threatening to evict me from the new place. I can't pay everything. I've been juggling—" "You mean collecting?" I interjected, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. His breath hitched. I didn't lie. Not really. I just stretched the truth. You were helping. What's the harm in saying you weren't? I didn't respond. He sniffled, wiping a tear from his cheek. "Brenda and Arthur said you'd cave. That you always do." That sentence slid down my spine like a shard of ice, and just like that, the years of exhaustion, of scraping by while they smiled wide at him, settled into something dense, permanent. There was no argument left in me. I simply, quietly, closed the door. 2 days passed. I went to work. I changed my oil. I folded laundry while reruns played softly on the TV. I didn't speak to anyone about what had happened at my door. Then, on Wednesday evening, my cousin Maya texted me, "You need to see this. It's gross." Attached was a screen recording from Instagram Live, Jax's boys' night at his lavish dorm. Someone had reposted it before he could delete it. In the clip, Jax lounged on a plush bed, sipping from a pink straw, a designer watch gleaming on his wrist. His friend, the lanky blonde from before, asked, "How do you even afford all this stuff, man? You're living large." Jax grinned, a smug, knowing look on his face. "Easy. My stepsister's got this martyr complex. Just say my family." And she opens her wallet. The room erupted in laughter. She thinks she's the smart one. Bless her heart. That last line, delivered with a casual, almost pitying tone, it stung in a different way, like stepping on a splinter you didn't know was there, deep and sharp. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just walked to the closet, pulled out my file folder labeled "For Later," and added a sticky note to the top. Tonight, I stopped being her story. The next morning, I booked a private room at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant downtown. I sent the invite to Brenda, Arthur, and 2 aunts, Aunt Clara and Aunt Rose, who'd always said, "You girls need to stick together." I titled the event Family Update. They came. Of course they did. Brenda wore her finest pearls. Arthur adjusted his cuffs like it was a wedding rehearsal. Jax showed up in designer flats I'd recognize anywhere because I paid for them. When everyone had settled and ordered their drinks, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker. Without introduction, without a word, I pressed play. Jax's voice, amplified, filled the intimate room. "Just say my family," and she opens her wallet. Laughter, loud and uncomfortably clear, echoed in the sudden silence. She thinks she's the smart one. Bless her heart. Silence. Valora's face drained of color, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Brenda's lips parted, a silent gasp. Arthur blinked, as though he didn't understand English anymore, his jaw slack. I stood slowly, reached into my tote, and pulled out a crisp cashier's check. $1, I said, setting it precisely in the center of the table. That's all I owe him now. Then, beside it, I placed the folder. 3 inches thick, tabbed, meticulously documented, dated. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every lie. I looked at no one in particular, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. "Keep it or burn it," I stated, my voice calm, unwavering. "Doesn't matter." Brenda finally found her voice, a strained whisper. "Elara, let's not." But I was already walking out. I didn't slam the door, didn't pause for effect. On the sidewalk, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. There was no applause, no dramatic background music, no hug from a long-lost relative, just air and peace, and a silence I finally owned. And he thought it was over. But the bill for all his lies was just coming due. The morning after the dinner, I woke up not to silence, but to a storm brewing online. I hadn't posted anything. I didn't need to. But Jax had. He filled his feed with cryptic quotes, the kind of melodramatic pronouncements he always favored. Sometimes blood doesn't mean loyalty. Betrayal always comes from the ones closest to you. It was the usual curated mess he posted after blowing something up and pretending he was the victim. Only this time, it wasn't working. Underneath his self-pitying captions, the comments began to shift, a subtle but significant tide turning. One read, "Wait, I thought your stepsister was paying your rent." Another, more pointed, "Didn't she cover your books and groceries too?" And then someone, likely Maya, posted a link to a public tweet from that same cousin who'd sent me the video. Funny how the truth sounds like betrayal to a liar. The cracks were visible now, and they weren't mine. Around noon that day, I was cleaning out the pantry when I heard the familiar hum of Brenda and Arthur's car pulling into my driveway. Not Jax. I didn't open the door immediately. I took my time tying the trash bag, rinsing my hands, wiping them carefully on a towel. Then I answered. Brenda's eyes were already glassy, brimming with unshed tears. Arthur's jaw was clenched, his voice sharper than I'd heard in years. "You embarrassed him," he said, his voice low and furious. "You embarrassed us." I didn't flinch. I just tilted my head slightly, my gaze steady. "No," I countered, my voice calm, unwavering. I stopped, covering for him. He embarrassed himself. Brenda tried to reach for something softer, a plea for understanding. "You could have just talked to us, Elara." "I did," I said, my voice steady. "Many times. You just didn't hear me." They didn't stay long. There was no apology, no real attempt at reconciliation. But there weren't any threats either, just silence, heavy and final. And when the front door closed behind them, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a boundary. That weekend, I finally started packing in earnest. The new house was small, just over 900 square feet near the coast. But it was mine. A tangible reward for years of unseen labor. I hadn't even told most of my family. Yet, just my boss at the garage, who offered a knowing smile and a silent nod, and my cousin Maya. I methodically boxed up clothes, books, labeled cables and cords, taking my time with each item, a quiet ritual of letting go. In the back of a drawer I'd nearly forgotten, I found a small velvet box, the sapphire necklace, the one I'd given Jax when he graduated, the one I saw later gifted to his boyfriend like it meant nothing. I turned it over in my hand, the silver chain catching a slice of light through the window. It used to feel heavy with guilt and resentment. But today, it just felt like mine again. I placed it in my own jewelry drawer, not to wear, not yet, not as a trophy or symbol, just because I no longer had to give it away. That evening, Jonah texted me. "Heard what happened. Proud of you." I stared at the message for a while, a small smile playing on my lips before typing my reply. It took me too long, but I got there. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The next day, I met Maya for coffee. She slid into the booth like she always had, shoulders loose, phone in hand, ready for gossip. But this time, she didn't bring drama. She brought grace. "You were always the strong one, Elara," she said over her mug of steaming coffee, her eyes holding genuine admiration. I smiled, and for the first time I didn't correct her. The last box I packed was labeled loose ends. It held old receipts, folded letters, faded photographs, pieces of who I was before I realized that being quiet wasn't always the same as being kind. A week later, I stood on the porch of my new place, barefoot, a warm mug of coffee in hand. The ocean air rolled in, soft and slow, carrying the faint scent of salt and freedom. The sapphire necklace hung around my neck now. I didn't wear it for them. I wore it because it was mine again. I ran my fingers along the cool chain and whispered, more to myself than anyone, this was the last thing I gave away without asking if I wanted it back. And I didn't need closure. I had become it. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand, even with family, to protect your own peace? If Elara's story resonated with you, share your own experience in the comments below. Your strength might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.